I read once that a number of years ago, a national poll was taken by the research group, the Barna Research Group, and they asked individuals one question, and it was this: what word or phrase would you like to hear most said to you? So if I looked you in the eyes and I sat you down, what phrase or word would you like to hear the most? Now, the first one is low-hanging fruit. You might be able to guess this one. The first phrase that creates the most joy in a human brain is the phrase, "I love you." The second phrase was interesting. It was, "I forgive you." And the third phrase that topped the charts was, "Dinner is ready." There's nothing quite like the dinner bell, right? At least in my household growing up, it was, "Ya está lista la cena," and you would come running to dinner because it's time to eat. Or we all know the famous dinner bell. It came from, farmhouses with the triangles or actual bells that were rung because the workers were far away. Cell phones didn't exist. You had to get the message out to them. Can you imagine being the worker out there? You've been up since 5 a.m., plowing the field, working the animals. You work up a big appetite, and you're just wondering, why isn't that bell ringing? What, is there a delay in the kitchen? What's going on? But then finally when it rings, I'm coming. For us, some of our most favorite memories happen around the family dinner. Also some of the greatest trauma, I think. Sometimes the greatest conflict could occur, but don't you love those moments when you share the same old family story for the 100th time, but it's just as funny as the first time around? And those memories that are created, something happens around the supper table, the dinner table, that is special. It's such a unique fellowship. When you think about the biblical narrative, the sweeping story from Genesis to Revelation, one of the big themes is the top phrase that people love to hear. It's that God is saying to us, "I love you." From the creation to the rivers and the oceans and the adventures that we could go experience and things that we could get to see and the good food that we get to enjoy, we hear over and over and over again God saying, "I love you." And then when Jesus came on the scene, died on the cross after having lived a perfect life, taking on our penalty for our stead, then we hear the second phrase from God, which is, "I forgive you." And interestingly, when Jesus came on the scene, he actually talked about food a lot. And today, our focus is his teaching that he said, "I am the bread of life." And we're focusing in on John chapter 6, when he fed miraculously a multitude of people, in essence also saying, dinner is ready. I love you. I forgive you. Supper is served. That's exactly what's occurring in John chapter 6. There's actually this rhythm that happens a lot in the book of John. A miraculous event occurs, a supernatural kapow moment where God does something shocking and surprising, and then Jesus explains it, and he kind of unpacks it, he debriefs it, and he says, this is what was going on. And so you have this rhythm of a supernatural miracle and an explanation, a miracle, explanation. And here, Jesus feeds the multitude. It says 5,000 men plus women and children, so probably 15 to 20,000 people from just mere fish and loaves. And then he explains it. And in his discourse, in the context of his explanation, he says, "I am the bread of life. Dinner is served." In just a little while, we're going to open the buffet line. We're going to serve dinner, a spiritual meal here on Communion Sunday. If Jesus was a Masters champion and he had to choose the Masters champion dinner, I believe that he would choose flatbread, roasted quail, honey, and wine. That would be his Masters champion dinner. This is what he feeds his people in the wilderness. This is what he feeds the people again now in the wilderness. There's a very strong Mosaic theme with what God is doing here. We don't have time to go into it today. we're put an asterisk on that because later this year we'll be doing a whole sermon series on communion and the Lord's Supper and what is really occurring here and why did Jesus institute it as a sacrament. We'll have time to unpack the Mosaic theme in here a little bit more later. But Jesus is bringing to his people a sort of lifting of the vision. As he rings the dinner bell and feeds them, he's also saying there's something more going on here at the spiritual level. If you're joining us for the first time today, you just happen to not maybe be here the last few weeks, you're finding us in the middle of a series called More Than a Name. And the whole concept that we've been wrestling with is that one single name cannot contain God. He is more than one name. He's more than a name. He is so marvelous, mysterious, and complex that he needs many names to be described. And in the Old Testament, he revealed himself to his people as I am Yahweh. And then in the New Testament, when Jesus comes on the scene, this second person of the Trinity, he puts more color on that. And there are 7 statements in the book of John where he says, I am the light of the world. I am the good shepherd. I am the vine. I am the door. And today we're focusing on I am the bread of life, which he says after this miracle. I want today to be for you a 5D experience. You ever been to a 3D movie theater? Those are cool. You ever been to a 4D movie theater where you've got the lenses and they throw water at you, all that stuff? Okay, today it's 5D, all right? We're engaging all the senses. Hopefully you smelled the beautiful bread aroma as you walked in the service today. And maybe it made you a little hungry. And I asked a few of you guys, including Dan, I said, hey, does this make you hungry? And he said, yeah. And I was like, I want you to know, what are you really hungry for? And he was like, pancakes. I want you to be hungry for more of who God is, the spiritual nourishment that he is willing and ready to give us today. So you're going to be engaged with your smell. You're going to be able to touch the bread of life. You're going to be able to taste the bread of life, see the bread of life. You're hearing now me speak about the bread of life. But you know what? The 5 senses of smelling, touching, hearing, seeing, tasting, let's go a step further. I want this to be a 6D experience for you because I want you to do all these things, but I also want you to feel it like in your heart. I want you to experience the presence of God today, and you are the limiting factor if you don't. Why? Because God says we must come to him with humble hearts of surrender, with a pure, simple prayer. Lord, I want more of you. But if we come to the table with just a closed heart, with just a spirit of religious activity, we can miss what God is doing. And sometimes he blows through like a cool breeze, like an aroma that just hits you. And suddenly, there he is, his presence. And he is here, friends, ready to engage, serve, minister to you. Every single one of us needs something different this morning. I know because I prayed with some of you right before this service. Some of you need medical healing. Some of you have a friend that needs medical healing. Some of you have very difficult challenges you're facing. Some of you are in seasons of joy. We bring all of that to this dinner table where Jesus is saying, I am the bread of life. Travel with me 10,000 feet above the scripture to see it in context. Jesus is putting into sequence some really neat events, little moments that are all thematic around bread. And you have to use the book of John and the Gospel of Matthew to sort of chain these events together. So if you turn to John chapter 6, you're not going to find this neatly sequenced as I'm about to describe it to you. But essentially, this is what occurs. Do you remember right after Jesus talked to the woman at the well in the book of Matthew, his disciples come back to him and they say they're concerned about Jesus' caloric intake. And they've said, hey, have you had anything to eat recently? And he says to them, I've got food that you don't know about. And they're wondering, like, has he got a power bar shoved in his pocket? Like, where is he getting this food from? They were thinking on a fleshly, carnal level. And he says, no, let me clarify this. My food, my bread, is to do the will of the Father. When I do his will, it gives me nourishment. All right, that's sequence number one. Then Jesus feeds the 5,000. He takes little bread and makes it much bread, and he gives thanks, and he raises it up, and then he says, I am the bread of life. Then, so there's a little moment, then a moment with the masses, and then another little moment. A moment when a Canaanite woman calls out to Jesus in the crowd and says, Jesus, my daughter is demon-possessed, and she needs healing. Would you please come and heal her? And I'm making this up. It's not told to us expressly in the scriptures, but I imagine that Jesus didn't even look up at her because he didn't respond right away. And that clued the disciples into thinking, well, he doesn't want to talk to her. He's not wanting to engage. And so the disciples begin to try and shoo her away. And she keeps crying out to God and calling out here. And she bows down before him, and I imagine her kind of pushing her way back through. And then he finally does speak back up to her, and I'm imagining this too, but I wonder if he didn't even look up to her again. He just said, you ever have someone talk to you without looking at you, but you know they're talking to you? And he said, I have come to give bread to the nation of Israel, the people of God. It is not right to give bread that was made for the children to the dogs. Ouch. And then her response creates a new reply from Jesus, because she replies in faith and she says, yes, but even the dogs eat the breadcrumbs that fall from the table. And Jesus replies and he says, woman, your faith is great. This very moment, your daughter is healed. And then after that, Jesus then feeds the 4,000, again, multiplying bread for the masses. You have these chain of events where Jesus is dealing with this theme of bread, and he says, I am the bread of life. What do these stories reveal to us? What does this context that we see biblically, what do these interactions cause us to learn? Well, first of all, friends, one of the key takeaways I want you to walk out of here is this: Jesus is all I need. Jesus is all I need. I mean, can you say that with your soul and your heart, not just words that come out? Can you, when you say those words, is there something deep that resonates within your spirit that says yes, amen, and hallelujah, and you believe it? And guess what? If you don't yet believe it that deeply, that's okay. Saying it is the beginning of it. It's the start. Because sometimes when I say that in prayer too, I say, Jesus, you're all I need. Then I have this other little voice that stands up and says, well, you also need X, Y, Z. Don't you also want X, Y, Z? And there's this war and battle that goes on, and then my spirit rises up and yes, Jesus is all I need. There is no other spiritual carbohydrate that I need than the bread of life, the single solitary bread of life. It's a question of appetites. What are you hungry for most of all? You see, because in John 6:26, Jesus says, some of you only following me because I filled your belly with bread. You're missing it. You've got to awaken yourself that there is a greater food than you need. Jesus already said it. My true food is to do the will of the Father. That's a greater sustenance than the food that I can put in my belly. It requires a humility to come before the Lord and say, I am not self-sustainable. I can't feed myself. This spiritual nourishment comes from outside of me from God to me. What did Jesus teach us how to pray in the Lord's Prayer? Give us this day our daily bread. That means you didn't have it to begin with. That means you needed it. You currently do not have it, and you need it on the daily. So Jesus is really all that we need. I wonder if you felt that tension and the zing these last few days when people's portfolios across the board didn't do so good. Yeah, we can come into church and say, Jesus is all I need, but then when that portfolio drops 10, 15, 20%, wow, it flashes the light on maybe there's an area, I got a little bit of work to do right there. Thank you, Jesus. I don't need money more than I need God. I don't need food more than I need Jesus. I don't need popularity, power, success, or recognition more than I need Jesus. See, we go to all the secondary false feeding troughs when God is calling us to his heavenly banquet. Instead of being inwardly focused and bent, he does the hard work of bending us Godward and heavenward by giving us the true spiritual nourishment of a heavenly meal. Jesus is all I need, and it can be simple, but man, is that deep. And I can ask myself that question, is he all I want? Lord, I want that to be true of me. That not only are you all I need, but you're also all I want. And I want that to be true of you as well, my friends. Why? Because he's the only source of spiritual nourishment. He is the only one that can give us what we actually need. And it's all free. This food, this spiritual nourishment, comes at no cost to us. Jesus came, lived a perfect life, died a death that we could not die, to come back to life and resurrect himself in a way that we could not, to give us a gift that we did not deserve. And it's all free to us. And guess what? It's not just free to us, it's free to all. When this miracle of the feeding of the 5,000 is described, it says they went to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee. Meaning, that's more like Gentile territory. And yes, some of the Hebrew nation would have followed him because he was healing people and he was doing miracles, but there would have been Gentiles over there as well. He was giving his bread of life not just to the Hebrew nation. This is spiritual free nourishment for all. Think about the Canaanite woman that she cried out in faith and he healed her. He gave her spiritual nourishment as well. It's not just for one people group, it's for all of us. And guess what? It's also for the people that spat in Jesus' face and stabbed him in the back. John 13:30. As soon as Judas had taken the bread, he went out. Jesus offered the meal of fellowship to the same one that he knew would betray him, would mistreat him, would speak badly about him, would betray him. Must we too offer a meal of fellowship to those that mistreat us and betray us as well? It's free to you, but it came at great cost to God. One pastor from Oregon pointed out that wheat in itself is not digestible by the human body. So if you were just to grab wheat in its raw form and ate it, it would provide no nourishment to you. No, wheat needs to go through a very violent crushing and milling process in order to become flour that can be made into bread. And so when Jesus was saying, I am the bread of life, he also was saying, it's free to you, it's free to all, but it's not free to me. I'm about to have to go through a violent, crushing, milling process in order that on the other side of that, I could provide for you spiritual nourishment. Yes, in light of that, I will now live with total surrender to you, God. Every piece of me belongs to you. You are all that I need forever, and you're all that I want. You are now Lord of my life because you took on the crushing for my stead. I love you. I forgive you. supper is served. You know, the amazing thing about a name is that it has power, intense amount of power. And if I give you my name through something called the power of attorney, you now have the authority to make life-altering decisions for me. You could spend all my money. You could make medical decisions about me. You could sell my house. You could not sell me. You have power of attorney. I've given you my name. And what's interesting about this story is that there's an empowering moment that happens with Jesus and his disciples. He's the one that produces the miracle, but then he says to his disciples, now you go and feed the people. He turned to Philip and said, hey, Philip, where are we going to get food to feed all these people? Where are we going to get bread to feed all of these multitudes of people? And Philip was like, just no stores. Years and years of wages would be not enough to feed all these people. He produces the miracle, and then he empowers his disciples. Now go, organize the people, have them sit down, give this bread away. Jesus has many names, and he has given them to us. Almost like a power of attorney transfer. And he says, now go, act and live as if you were doing it for me and in my name. Go and feed the people. It's almost as if, when Jesus turned to Philip and said, hey, where are we going to get bread to feed all these people? He's turning to you now and saying, where are we going to get bread to go feed the world? Not just to fill their bellies. I'm talking about the spiritual nourishment. I want you to feel individual ownership for this mission. It's not their job or mine. It's your job. And yes, it's our job too. But Jesus is calling and turning to you. I want you to imagine that. Where are we going to get bread to feed all these people? He's the one that does the miracle. We don't have to have all the enact force in ourselves, but we have now been given his name to go out and do the mission and vision of this church, which is to build God's kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. He is the bread of life.